Welcome back to Boostline Performance. Now today we've got another one of our LT engines on the dyno, this one being LTR based, but that's not really important because today we're going to be installing our Holley Terminator X Max and walking you through the process alongside us. So this is of course going to be a direct injection engine. We'll be using the Holley Terminator X Max LT4 variant to control the DI. So let's go ahead and we'll get the harness and the computers out. We'll get everything laid out. We'll start the installation. We'll go through every sensor and every plug so you know just where it goes and why. So stick around, let's get started. All right, so firstly getting started, we're gonna grab our main harness for the LT engine. There's not really any good way to do this, but I'll take my favorite and we'll just go ahead and lay it across just as if we're gonna route everything from there. Now, what I wanna do is separate fuel pressure sensor. We won't be using it in this application. Let's see, that is gonna be the TPS. We won't be using that in our application either. What else? Now the map, this is going to need to be towards the back of the engine. We're gonna run that right there in the back of our Holley high ram. Let's see what else we got here. We are going to use our oil pressure sensor. I believe we'll be using that sensor as well. So no fuel, that stays. Crank harness, we're gonna go ahead and take that and it's going to run down the base of the passenger side of our LT engine here, sensor being in the back of the crank. So let's see, knock, we're good there too, that's all good. That's good, that's gonna be routed here anyway, so that can stay. I wanna take these two that we're not gonna be using, and I wanna tape them back with the rest of the harness that we won't be using in this application. Now, if you are a supercharged application, you will be using, of course, supercharger bypass, things of that nature. But we won't be, so the only thing I really need at this moment from this harness is going to be this right here, which will go down to our cam sensor. And then this is going to be our map sensor, which will sit right here. Everything else we should be pretty good on. So we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so I like to think that I've got a good portion of my harness laid out where I'd like to have it. So we're gonna go ahead and get started on grabbing sensors, grabbing plugs, and putting them where they go. So let's get on to it. All right, so I've got this portion of the harness laid out. I have a plug in my hand and it is going to be identified as LOMA. So that's gonna go towards our cam position sensor, all of our DOD active stuff. So we'll go ahead and get down in here. Get it right. There we go. We've got our first click. I believe that is going to be our coolant temp sensor, so we'll go ahead and plug that in there. And then we'll go ahead and plug in our oil pressure sensor right there. All right, so now we are going to plug in the crank sensor. I've got the harness right here. You'll see that it's heat wrapped, easy to find. We'll just bring it down in here to the crank sensor and we'll get it plugged in. You'll hear it click. Wonderful. All right, now we're moving on to the ignition coil harness. I'll need that grounded on each head. So we'll start with this one and then we'll make our way over to the driver's side. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, now we're going to essentially do the same thing on the driver's side. So we'll just grab our bolt, pick a hole, and that will be our ground right there. All right, so we've got our odd ignition, we've got our even ignition. That's going to be for our coil pack harnesses coming over here, and of course on the opposite side. But now what we want to turn our attention to is going to be the LT4 pump and the injectors we have on this LT engine. So we're gonna go ahead with our LT4 injector harness. Go ahead and plug this one in, just like so. And now I have a plug right here and I have a plug right here. We will need to find those within our harness. All right, so to plug in our injectors, we of course are going to need the DI module. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna go ahead and plug in our Terminator X Max computer. Just a couple plugs here, one there, for our TPS. This one is going to be our power. And the very last plug on the Terminator X Max is going to be for transmission control. And this is going to be the plug for the DI module. All right, now we have our other portion of the harness. So we'll go ahead and plug that in and we'll run it over to our injectors. So it's just gonna be right there, as simple as that. Just right over. And this is gonna go to the DI module. We'll have that mounted right there. And this one will go right here. And then again, same harness, same plugs, just like so. Now we will fasten both of these here with zip ties just for the time being as we run it on the dyno. And we'll link these. We do still have to run our power and ground for both of these computers and plug it into the DI module. So we'll do that now. All right, so as you can see, we've got our Terminator X Max here. We've got the DI module. It is also here and all plugged in. I will still need to connect our injectors to the DI module. That's gonna be right here in the harness, as well as, I'm sorry, it's right there. But also we're gonna need to run our power and ground for both the DI controller and the Terminator X Max, as well as the ignition wire for the Terminator X Max. So we'll go ahead and get moving on that now. So here is going to be our harness going directly to the direct injection module. We have injectors even, and then we have injectors odd. So we'll go ahead and just get those on the right bank. And we're gonna go ahead and plug them in. So of course, this side of injector is here. We're good there. And now our even bank of injectors is gonna plug in right here. All right, so as you can see there, we've got both of our injector harnesses for both banks, even and odd, plugged into the DI module. We're gonna hold off and running our power and ground and ignition wires for both of these controllers as we continue to finish up the harness, and we'll go ahead and throw the intake on as well so we can sort out everything and really wrap this installation up. All right, so we've got our intake mounted. We're now gonna move on to plugging in our ignition coils. So I've got both of our harnesses here. I'll go ahead and check. This is going to be cylinder 1, so this will be our odd bank, and then this one will be our even. So we'll go ahead and just sit it there. Let's go ahead and plug it in if we can. All right, now we've got our ignition coils on both banks wired, installed. We're good there. We've got our injectors for both banks wired, installed. We're good there. I think we should go on and move to our T-map. I've cheated a little bit. I've already got this plugged in, but that's where that's gonna be. And now I think we can move on to final ignition, hot and ground wiring. All right, now I know we said we were gonna move on to our hot, ground, and ignition wire, but there is one thing that I missed. So let's go ahead and get our O2 sensor plugged in. It's gonna simply go right into our adapter harness. So we will need to get the other portion of our O2 adapter sensor, or harness for the sensor itself. We'll get that plugged in, connect these two, tie it away, call it a day. So give me just a second, let's jump on that. All right, this is going to be our adapter for the harness to go over to our O2 sensor. And just to clarify, this is going to be part number Holley 271R1234A. And basically what we're gonna do is just plug it in, just like so. So there's that. Come back around to our harness. And I'm just gonna loop this to kind of tidy things a little bit. And there we are. Now I can roll that, put it on our hanger, and we're good. All right, we are on to the final step of wiring our Holley Terminator X Max and the DI module. And then we'll go ahead and get oil and fuel going and we'll get this thing started. But let's get back to it. All right, so we've got a ground, which is what this will be. And then you'll notice this red wire has a white stripe all the way down it, right? That's going to be our ignition wire. So this wire will be our hot 12-volt source. This black is a ground, white stripe, red wire is ignition. Now again, we're gonna go over to the DI module, same situation. Black is ground, the big red wire is going to be our 12-volt power source. So a battery, 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 ignition. Let's get it done. So there's our hot. Now our ground.
Something to note when completing your install on your Holley LT4 Terminator X Max is that if you buy the wrong harness or the wrong sensor, it will not start or run. When you buy your Holley harness, make sure that you buy it for the correct fuel pressure sensor. You can always swap the sensor and the sub harness later if you don't have the correct components, but if they are not correct, you are going to have a difficult time getting your LT started and running. Another thing to note when setting up your Holley Terminator X Max is to verify the fuel system data as well as the fuel lobe data on your camshaft. You want to make sure the fuel pump multiplier is the same as the fuel lobe oversize percentage. Some camshafts will be different, so just ensure the proper data from the camshaft is entered into the Holley Terminator X Max. If you have any mismatches in data for your engine's fuel system or camshaft, you are bound to have issues tuning the engine and getting it to run correctly. Double check your data before you attempt to start your engine. If all of the data for your fuel system and camshaft is entered correctly, startup and tuning should go smoothly.
All right, that's just about gonna wrap it up for our install of our LT4 based Holley Terminator X Max and DI module on our LTR here. It's been a lot of fun. It's a little hot for us here in Texas, but I hope that you learned a little bit and maybe I was able to help you complete your installation on your LT based application. Let's go ahead and get this thing running. Let's go ahead and get the fuel system. We'll get some oil in it. We'll get it started up. We'll break it in. We'll make it pull.